My name is Emma Parker. I live in a small house on Maple Street with my little dog, Buttons. I work at the coffee shop on Main. I like quiet mornings and the way the town smells like cinnamon in November. I am kind. I try to be kind even when people are not kind back. I believe in fairness. I also believe you should treat people the way you want to be treated. One cold December morning, I read a message from my sister, Jenna. She wrote, "You're not getting a single gift this Christmas. Money is tight." The words stung. They were short and sharp like cold wind. She sent them in a family group chat after I asked if she could help pay for a new winter coat for my son, Marcus. I felt small and angry. Marcus is 7. He still believes in Santa. He still writes letters with glitter and crayons. I needed a coat for him because the one he had was full of holes and the lining was worn thin. I kept reading the messages in the group. Jenna didn't stop there. She made jokes about budgeting and how hard things were. She wrote about bills and rent and how everyone needed to cut back. I breathed in slowly and told myself I would understand. Families say things when they are stressed. I told myself, maybe she really can't help. Later that same morning, while making pancakes for Marcus, I saw it. Jenna had posted photos on her private Instagram. The pictures were bright and full of smiles. In the first photo, Jenna stood by 2 huge bikes with shiny frames and thick tires. Her kids, Lily and Aiden, wore matching helmets and laughed like the world was only for them. Another photo showed Jenna in front of airport check-in desks, 3 suitcases beside her. A caption read, "Family trip. Sun, sand, and smiles. We deserve this. #grateful." In the last slide, there was a video of the kids at a toy store, turning in slow motion with balloons in their hands as Jenna laughed in the background. My hands went cold. I reread her message, "You're not getting a single gift this Christmas. Money is tight." I felt something close to a crack inside my chest. I thought of Marcus, how he had been saving his allowance in a jar with a sticker that said, "For winter." I thought of the way he had hugged me the night before and asked if our heater would stay on. I felt small and tired and very, very angry. I did not make a big scene. I closed the phone and fed Buttons. I put on my coat and took Marcus to school. I tried to smile at him and told him to have fun at recess. He ran off without knowing the storm in me. At lunch, I sat at a table in the back of the coffee shop. The jukebox played soft music. I looked at Jenna's pictures again. They made my throat hurt. I opened my messages and typed one line. I did it quietly. I did not tell anyone. I did not storm out. I sent a single message to one person, our dad. "Dad," I wrote, "are you seeing Jenna's posts?" I hit send. By noon my dad stood on my doorstep, screaming. He banged the knocker like he wanted to break the wood. His breath made clouds in the cold. He was red in the face. His eyes were wide and wild and wet. He called, "Emma. Open up." I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Marcus was at school. Buttons barked and ran in circles. I opened the door slowly. Dad pushed his way in. He did not sit. He did not take off his coat with calm. He stood in the middle of my living room and shouted, "What is wrong with her? What is she thinking?" I wanted to say something. I wanted to be loud and angry back. I wanted to ask him why he had never noticed before. I wanted to tell him everything. But Dad's chest heaved like he had been running. He put his face close to mine and said, "How could she? Those pictures, did she pay for those with money I gave her?" My mouth went dry. I thought about the message I had sent. I had only asked if he had seen the posts. I had not meant for him to come. I had not expected him to be this angry. I had not expected his face to be like a storm. He slammed his fist on my table. The coffee mugs rattled. The sound felt like an alarm. Dad's anger did not only come from the pictures. It came from things that had been hiding for years. It came from promises and secrets and the small, quiet burns of betrayal you breathe in until you can't hold them. Dad had always been kind. He worked 2 jobs after Mom left. He taught me to fix a tire and to always say thank you. He taught Jenna how to ride a bike and how to patch a wall. He believed family comes first. When Jen said money was tight, he had listened. He had tried to help in small ways, a few dollars here, a promise to pick up toys for the kids sometimes, a surprise for a birthday. He had never kept a big bank account. He gave what he could. He helped because he loved them. Now, seeing Jenna's life of trips and bikes and toys, he felt cheated. He felt stupid. His hands shook. I wanted to tell him I had sent the message because I wanted him to see the truth. I wanted him to know the same cold that sat in my chest. Instead, I watched as his face changed. At first it was anger, then confusion, then sorrow. Men do not always know how to show they are hurt. He cleared his throat and said, "Emma, I thought we were all looking out for each other. I thought I knew you too. Did she lie to me? Did she steal?" I could not answer. My eyes burned. I remembered a night years ago when Dad had come home with a small present for Marcus, a toy truck that cost less than $20. Marcus slept with it like it was the moon. I had seen Dad fold the receipt and hide it in his pocket because he could not afford the look on his son's face if he knew the truck was secondhand. Dad kept shouting, but between the words I heard the small sounds of a man falling apart. He called Jenna's name, as if calling could pull her to him. He said, "How long has this been going on?" I thought about the photos again. I thought about how she had written, "Money is tight." I thought about the moments she had come over to borrow sugar or to borrow my stapler and say, "Till next week." I remembered how she had once sobbed in our kitchen about rent and a car payment. I heard her whining voice in my memory, and I wanted to believe her. But the pictures were clear. Jenna's kids looked clean and happy in brand new clothes. The bikes were expensive. The suitcases were new and glossy. She used fancy words that were not hers. She used the same language as those people who advertise expensive things on TV. Dad took out his phone and started to scroll. He called Jenna on speaker. Her voice reached us like a small radio. She sounded surprised and a little annoyed. He asked, "Jenna, tell me about this. Who paid for those bikes?" She laughed lightly. A laugh that made something inside me break. I could hear a child in the background. "Dad," she said, "we saved up. We worked for it. You know how it is. Sometimes you need to treat the kids, you know." Dad did not say anything. That silence was a hollow room that echoed. He asked where she had gotten the money. She answered in a way that could mean nothing or everything. She said she had sold some old things. She had done some extra shifts. She had a friend who helped. After the call, Dad looked at me like his eyes could peel a house. He whispered, "Emma, have you?" I could not finish the sentence. I had not told him everything. I had not meant to ruin anyone. I had only wanted him to see the photos. Now he was here, and the air felt sharp. I told him about Marcus's coat. I told him how I had asked Jenna if she could help. I showed him the message she had sent in the family chat. He read it and sighed as if he had swallowed a rock. Dad sat down heavily on my old couch. He took off his hat and ran his hand through his hair. He said, "I'll talk to her. I'll find out. I won't be rude, Emma. I won't do anything to embarrass her. But I will ask." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think this would be the end. I wanted to think Dad would get the truth and fix everything. I wanted to think this would be a small storm that would pass. But storms sometimes break trees. They sometimes drive people away. A few hours later, a less loud part of the day arrived. The coffee shop closed. The town flattened into a tired, soft gray. Snow dusted the roof. Marcus came home from school singing a silly song about a penguin. He hugged me and asked if he could have hot chocolate. I said yes. I made it with extra marshmallows and forgot for a second that the world had turned loud earlier. I thought about kindness. I thought about my mother, who used to say, "Kindness is not a trophy, Emma. It's a light you carry whether people see it or not." I thought about how I had tried to be kind to Jenna even when she snapped at me. I had lent her money once, not because I had much, but because I did not like seeing her children cold. She cried and said thank you then. I had believed her tears. I had always thought she would be the person to step up when I needed help. But the pictures were a bitter thing. They showed a different story. I thought about how quiet the family chat had been for weeks. I thought about the little red circle of notifications on my phone that told me I was not the only one watching. That evening, Dad came back. He did not look the same as he had that morning. His face was paler. He had been to Jenna's apartment. He had talked to the landlord and asked about payments. He had asked neighbors about trips and deliveries. He had called people at the bike shop. He had walked through streets and listened to the clinking of coins. He told me what he had found. Not all of it was sharp. Some of it was small, like breadcrumbs. He said Jenna had been getting cash from a man who worked at a local store. The man had been helping Jenna for weeks, sometimes taking payments to cover rent or bills. He had been generous and kind. Dad said Jenna had been paid for doing online work he could not explain well. He said there were numbers on paper and messages that lost their meaning when you read them out loud. He said he did not know if Jenna had meant to lie, or if she had told half-truths to save face. I listened. My heart was a small, fast bird in my chest. I thought about the way people hide things. Sometimes they hide because they are ashamed. Sometimes they hide because they are afraid. Sometimes they hide because they are trying to protect someone else. The truth lives inside many boxes. We open one and find another box under it. Dad sat across from me and folded his hands. He looked like a man who needed to cry but had forgotten how. He said, "We must be fair. We will talk as a family. We will ask questions. We will not jump to mean things. We must be better than that." His words made tears prick my eyes. Still, under the quiet, something like anger coiled. I thought of the kids in the photos with new bikes while Marcus's coat had holes. I wondered if Jenna had told me money is tight because she thought it was easier than saying, "I bought these things and I'm sorry." I wondered how many small lies a family can carry before it breaks. The next day, a small thing happened. My mail came. I opened the thin white envelope and found a note. The handwriting was small and neat. It said, "Emma, I saw your post about the coat. I can help a little. Mrs. Alvarez." Mrs. Alvarez is the elderly woman who lives 2 houses down. She knits at her window and always gives the neighborhood children cookies. I cried quietly and hugged the note like it was a warm scarf. The kindness felt like a thread you could hold. Dad also called me and asked me to come over to his house that night. He said, "I need to show you something." He sounded serious, but not cruel. He sounded like a man trying to be brave. I walked to his house under a sky that had turned soft gray. Snow crunched under my shoes. The light in his living room was warm and smelled like cinnamon bread. He sat me down at the kitchen table and set a small stack of papers between us. On top was a receipt from a bicycle shop. The total was more than our family used to spend on dinners for a week. Under it were travel tickets, hotel reservations, and the glossy printouts of Jenna's Instagram photos that had been saved on his phone. He cleared his throat and said, "I don't want to humiliate Jenna, Emma. She is my daughter." His voice broke like someone stepping on a twig. "But I need to know if she asked me for help and then used it for other things. Did she lie to me?" I remembered the message again. I wondered if the single message I had sent had started a chain I could not stop. I thought of the many small acts that lead to big storms. I thought of the kindness from Mrs. Alvarez and how it sat with the cold pictures on the phone. Dad reached into his drawer and took out another envelope. Inside was a small stack of empty envelopes. They were labeled with names. One said Emma. Another said Jenna. He turned one over and showed me a small list of household items, coats, groceries, school fees. He had been saving money in small envelopes for when someone needed help. He looked at me and said, "I gave Jenna some money last year. Not much, but I gave her something in trust. She said it was for a repair. I trusted her. I did not think she would spend it for vacations." His voice softened. "It's not about the money, Emma. It's about the trust." My throat tightened. I remembered how Dad had once used his own lunch money to buy a book for me when I was in grade school. He had saved and hidden the receipt because he did not want me to worry about his pockets. He had always been quiet like that, giving without making noise. We sat for a long time with the papers between us. Outside, evening settled in like a blanket. The world got quiet. Marcus's small laughter rang in my mind as he played with buttons at home. I felt a small, heavy knot in my stomach. Then, as if the air wanted to punish us for thinking we had time, something extreme happened. A loud knock cut through the warm kitchen like a sharp blade. The lights in the hallway flickered. Dad stood up slowly. He walked to the door and opened it. There on the doorstep was Jenna. Her face was pale. Her hair stuck to her forehead like she had been running. Her hands were empty, trembling. Behind her was a man I did not know. He looked angry and tired. He held a letter and an envelope. He said something fast that made Dad's face go white. I had no time to breathe. The room tightened. Jenna's eyes found mine for a second, and I saw something close to fear. Dad tried to say her name, but his voice came out as a whisper. The man thrust the envelope forward. It slid across the floor and landed with a soft slap. The pages inside spilled out like a small river of papers. They were receipts and notes and messages. They were things that spoke of money moving and promises and dates. They were a map of how secrets had traveled. Jenna stepped back and looked at me. Her mouth opened as if she wanted to say, "Emma, I'm sorry," or maybe, "It's not what you think." The man behind her stepped forward and dropped a small black box on the table. He slammed it down like he wanted to make sure it made a sound. Dad grabbed the box and opened it. Inside was a small, bright object that blinked like a heart. It was a tracker device. Someone had placed it on Dad's truck months ago. Someone had been watching when he left the house and when he came back. Someone had followed him to work. Someone had examples of his movements. The man named places and times, and Dad's face crumpled. The room filled with the sigh of winter wind. Jenna made a sound that could be a cry or a laugh. She grabbed my arm and said, "Emma, I..." Before she could finish, the man said, "You took money you weren't allowed to. You used it to pay for things you couldn't explain. I try to give you the benefit of the doubt. But when I found this tracker, I wanted to show your father the truth." Dad's hand found my shoulder. He looked at me like he had found a map and did not know where the coast was. His voice trembled as he said, "Jenna, what have you done?" In that moment, time split into two, the quiet that had been before and the loud that came now. The paper on the table looked heavy and dangerous. The small black box seemed to pulse. I wanted to speak. I wanted to be the voice that mended things. I wanted to fix what had broken. But my voice felt small. I swallowed hard and watched as Jenna's face changed from pale to something like a stone. The man behind her stepped forward, his jaw set like iron. He held up his phone and said, "I have more. I have dates. I have transfers. I have messages." He pointed the phone at Dad and me, and its screen glowed like a small sun. Dad stood then, as if pulled by a string. He looked from Jenna to the papers to the phone. He reached out and grabbed one of the papers and read the numbers. His hands shook. He closed his eyes for a second and then opened them wide. He whispered one word that felt like a knife. "Why?" Jenna's mouth trembled. She opened it to answer, and then the sound of a siren wailed far away. The man behind her stepped back and said, "I called because I thought this would be better handled with the police." The kitchen seemed suddenly too small. The clock ticked loud and sharp. Outside, the streetlight flickered. Dad turned and said to me, "Emma, you sent that message, didn't you? You told me about the posts." I looked at him, and then at Jenna, and then at the man with the phone. My hands were cold. "Yes," I said. The single word landed in the air like a small stone. Dad closed his eyes and put his face in his hands. The room tilted a little. Jenna's shoulders shook as if she were about to fall. Then, the man with the phone looked at Jenna with something like pity and said, "There's more to tell. But you should know the truth now." Before any of us could breathe again, the front door slammed open. Two uniformed officers stepped in. They did not shout. They had small badges that flashed in the light. They asked questions in quick, calm sentences. The man with the phone handed over his evidence. Jenna's face went ashen. I reached for Dad's hand. He let me hold it but did not squeeze back. His fingers were as cold as the winter air. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break. I had sent one message, and by noon my dad had been on my doorstep, screaming. Now, we all stood in a small kitchen with papers on the table and police voices like rain in the background. Jenna looked at me with an expression I did not know how to read. The door to the kitchen closed softly behind the officers. Outside, the world was quiet but different now. I felt the ground shift under my feet. I knew that a long road had begun. I knew things would not be the same. And then Dad looked at me with eyes full of questions and said, "Emma, why did you send that message?" I swallowed and opened my mouth to answer. My voice shook. I wanted to say everything. I wanted to say I did it because Marcus needed a coat and because I was tired of small lies. I wanted to say I had hoped truth would fix things. I wanted to say I had wanted to protect our family from being ripped apart by secrets. But before I could finish, Jenna whispered, "Emma, you don't know what I had to do." Her voice was small and broken. She sank into a chair and folded into herself like a paper bird. The clock on the wall ticked. The police asked another question. The paper on the table looked like a map of a place I did not know how to travel. Outside, the siren faded and then returned like a distant storm. I looked at Dad. He looked at Jenna. Then, the lights in the kitchen flickered once and went out, leaving us in a circle of quiet and a single, small lamp that made soft shadows of everyone's faces. "Tell me everything," Dad said, almost a whisper. I took a breath and started to speak, but the words came out in pieces. The storm had only just begun. The lamp made soft circles on the table. The police badges glinted. The papers lay like a small, sad map. My hands shook as I tried to breathe. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and worry. The officer with a calm voice asked questions. He asked for names, dates, and what had happened since the morning. He listened without rushing. He did not yell. He wrote down every name on his little pad. When he asked Jenna to tell her side, she looked like she wanted the floor to open and take her away. Jenna's voice was small. She said she did not steal. She said she had been ashamed and scared. She said she had been trying to fix things alone. She told the officers about late nights, about missing shifts, about a man who said he could help her get money for a short time. She said she had been paid for work online that was supposed to be real, but then the money never showed like it should. She said she had taken some of Dad's extra envelopes one night when he left his desk. She said she had planned to put the money back the next week. She said she had not meant for anyone to get hurt. Her voice cracked when she said Marcus's name. She looked at me like she wanted me to fix it for her. I felt something break and then mend a little. I did not know what to feel. I wanted to be the big sister who always stood up and said, "I will protect you." But this time I felt small like a child because the story was bigger than me. The officer asked Dad to explain what he had been saving for and how he had noticed things missing. He told them about the envelopes with names. He told them about the truck and the nights he had to pick up extra shifts. He told them that family was the most important thing and that he had never wanted to hide money from anyone. We all said things that sounded like we were trying to hold together a paper boat in a rough river. The man who stood behind Jenna, his name was Tom, said he had gone to Jenna because he thought she was being scammed. He had found the tracker on Dad's truck when he was looking under the hood to see if the engine was okay. He said he had tried to help Jenna pay rent once. He said he had found messages and receipts that did not make sense, and when he tried to ask Jenna, she had shut him out. He said he did not want to cause trouble, but he felt like someone should see the truth. The officers asked him where he got the papers. He opened his phone and showed messages. He showed bank transfers and screenshots. The glow from the phone lit everyone's faces in small rectangles. Dad squinted and read the numbers. He could not make all of them fit into his head. One officer took Jenna aside for a short talk in a calm voice. The other officer sat with Dad and me while the room smelled like wet snow outside and hot cocoa inside. They told us they would investigate. They told us not to touch anything until they were done. They told us to stay calm. Those words were small and thin. I tried to be calm, but my mind was a room full of loud things. After the officers left with Tom and his phone, Jenna sat down like a leaf falling. She covered her face with both hands and shook. Dad put his head in his hands. He looked old in a way I had never seen. He looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy bag for a long time and had finally set it down. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to hug Jenna and tell her it would be all right. I wanted to fix it with words like a bandage. Instead, I sat on the couch and watched a clock tick. The second hand moved like a tiny footstep. Marcus came home from school later that day. He ran into the house with his backpack swinging and his face all bright. He sang a silly song about a penguin. For a second, the kitchen was warm and alive again. He hugged me with both arms around my neck and said, "Mom, did you see the penguin we drew today?" His small voice felt like a lifeline. I made him hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. He ate cookies like they were tiny clouds. He did not ask about Jenna or Dad or police. He asked about his homework and if Buttons could sleep on his bed that night. I breathed and let the small things hold me. That night, Dad called a family meeting at his house. He said he wanted to talk calm and slow so we could hear each other. He sat us in his living room around an old coffee table. The lamp was warm and the heater hissed softly. He pulled out a small book where he wrote important things, birthdays, jobs, and notes about who needed what. He said he loved his children. He said sometimes people make mistakes because they are afraid. He said he wanted to understand. Jenna told a longer story. She said she had been worried about rent and that the man who had helped her had asked for small favors. She said the favors had grown into things she felt she could not refuse. She said she had panicked when the bills came due. She admitted she used some of the envelopes. She told Dad she was sorry for lying about money being tight when she could have been honest. Her voice was a small river that could not wash away a heavy stone. Dad put his hand on Jenna's shoulder and said, "We will fix this. We will find out the truth. We will be fair." He sounded steady in a voice that wanted to be brave. I wanted to believe him. Days passed like pages turning. The officers called sometimes. Tom called sometimes. The bank called sometimes. The family chat had long silences. I watched Jenna go to work and come home. She tried to be normal for Lily and Aiden, who still laughed and played in the snow. They had no idea why their mother looked tired at night. They ate pancakes and colored with crayons. Children are small suns who keep shining even when clouds cover the world. I kept working at the coffee shop. I kept making lattes with hearts in the foam. People smiled at me and told me about their small troubles. I wrote down a shopping list every night and tried to make sure Marcus had everything he needed. I listened to his homework and made jokes when he fretted about spelling words. He loved the word adventure and wrote it in his little notebook. One evening, Mrs. Alvarez knocked on my door. She had hot soup and a small scarf. She walked in with the weathered smile that always made the room softer. She said she had been knitting and thinking of us. She said she would come over to help with coats and to bring soup when she could. I cried quietly on her shoulder, and she only patted my back and hummed a song that reminded me of when I was a child. The kindness of small people felt like stitches. It did not fix everything, but it kept the wound from opening more. Then, one morning, something small and strange happened. I came to the kitchen and found an envelope on the table with my name in Dad's handwriting. Inside was a folded piece of paper. It said, "Emma, I found this in Jenna's room when she asked me to check on a heater. I don't know why. I kept it for now." The paper was not a receipt. It was a sticky note with words. The note said, "Meet me at the pier. Come alone. I can help. L." I did not know who L was. My mind filled with questions like a cup fills with water. Why would Jenna have this note? Who is L? Did it mean help or danger? I put the note in my pocket like a hot coal and kept it there. A few days later, an envelope with a bill slipped under Dad's door. The bill had our last name on it. It was for a store we never used. The number was too high. Dad looked at it and frowned like someone reading a map with a missing piece. He called the bank. The bank said they were investigating strange transfers. They could not tell too much, but they said there were patterns that did not match Jenna's work or Tom's help. One afternoon, the police called and asked Jenna to come to the station to answer questions. She left while the kids were at school. Her face was pale, but she wore a brave jacket. She kissed Lily and Aiden quick and said she would be back soon. The house felt empty when she left. That night, I sat with Dad and Marcus. We ate spaghetti and talked about nothing. Dad told me a story about when Jenna and I were small and how she used to hide toys in the garden. He smiled like someone trying to remember good weather. Then he said quietly, "We need to be careful who we trust." Weeks passed and the case grew like a knot. The bank found transfers that went to accounts with names that did not match any of ours. There were payments to a travel agency and receipts from a bike shop. Some of the receipts had dates that matched the Instagram posts. The officers said things like, "We are following leads and we are working this." Those words sounded like a promise that had a long way to go. In the middle of this, something less sharp happened. Jenna came over one afternoon with Lily and Aiden. They were bright and loud and full of crayons. Jenna's smile was small and tired. She sat and talked to Marcus like nothing had happened. For a little while, the house was filled with the sound of children and the smell of cookies. For a while, I let the normal things sit on top of the worry like a lid on a pot. That night I lay in bed and thought about truth and kindness. I thought about how people sometimes break because they cannot tell the truth. I thought about how kindness should not be used like a coin given and taken. I thought about how I had sent one message that started this storm. I did not regret it, and I did not feel proud. I felt like I was on a narrow path with no map. Then, on a gray morning with snow like sugar on the ground, I got a phone call from the school. The voice on the line sounded small and shaky. "Emma," the woman asked. "This is Miss Carter. We can't find Marcus at the bus stop. He wasn't on the bus this morning." My chest froze. I looked at Buttons and he wagged his tail like an unaware drum. I ran to the school and then to the bus stop. The snow pressed soft around the footprints. There were shoes and a small blue backpack with a penguin patch near the bench. The bench was empty. My legs turned to jelly and I felt the world tilt. I called Dad. I called Jenna. The officers we had been talking to came quickly, their car lights blinking like worried eyes. They asked questions fast. Marcus's teacher came out and hugged me like a shield. I ran to every street I could think of. I called friends. I sent messages. I looked at the playground and behind the library. My breath was loud and hot in the cold air. People stood and watched. The town felt very large and very empty at the same time. As I reached the pier, I saw a small blue motorcycle parked under the lamppost. It had a penguin sticker on the side. My heart lurched. I thought of the sticky note with the letter L. I thought of the note that said, "Meet me at the pier." My mind moved through the things I had seen like a small light. Could it be? I ran faster. By the pier, the waves pushed slow and black. The surf hissed like a sleeping snake. There was a figure by the rail and a small shadow of a child near him. The figure turned, and for a moment the sun crossed his face, and I could not tell if he was good or bad. He wore a dark coat and his hands were in his pockets. The child looked small and looked like Marcus, but my chest still held a small hope that it was someone else. I shouted Marcus's name. The man turned his head slowly like a clock hand. His eyes were not the eyes I knew. He held a small paper bag. Marcus stood beside him, and for a second he looked at me like he had seen an adventure. He smiled as if nothing strange had happened. My knees gave out. I wanted to run and grab him and never let go. The man beside Marcus put a finger to his lips like a thief telling a secret. He said, "Emma, don't come closer." His voice was soft like winter mist, but it had a hard edge. I stopped. Time slowed again. My phone was in my hand. I wanted to call the officers. I wanted to jump. I wanted to throw myself into the sea to reach my child. My mouth felt empty. The pier smelled of salt and old wood. The man took a step back and then forward and said, "I have been waiting for you to find me. You sent messages. People have been watching. I need to talk." His voice held a strange calm like someone who has already decided the ending of the story. My heart pounded like a drum. Marcus laughed softly and reached for a small cookie in the paper bag. He did not seem afraid. He did not know his mother was unraveling. I looked up at the man's face and realized I had seen him before in one of the receipts or in a blurry photo on a phone screen. He was someone tied to the papers. He had been there all along like a shadow in old pictures. Right then, my phone rang. It was Dad. He said in a sharp voice, "Emma, get back here. Now." I turned to look at the road. Lights were flashing far away. Voices were closer now. The man beside Marcus still stood with his hands like he had nothing to hide. He said, "You sent one message and things moved fast. But there is more to tell. Are you ready to hear it?" I thought of kindness and truth. I thought of Marcus's penguin backpack and his small hands. I thought of the envelope that said, "Meet me at the pier." I thought of the small black tracker and the papers on the table. My chest filled with a cold that had a name. Then, without warning, something extreme and loud happened. A car sped down the road toward the pier like an arrow. Its tires screamed against the ice. People shouted. The car went off the road and crashed into the lamppost, sending sparks like small stars into the air. It did not hit us, but the sound was a gunshot in the quiet morning. Everyone froze. The man beside Marcus looked at the crash and then at me. Marcus looked up and smiled like it was a fireworks show. The world turned fast and bright and dangerous all at once. The sirens that had been like far birds now came close. People ran. The man dropped the paper bag and reached out for Marcus. I ran with every breath I had. The scene burst open like a story whose last page had been ripped out. I grabbed Marcus and hugged him so hard I felt him gasp. He laughed and said, "Mom." That was loud. His small voice was a broken bell. I held him and felt the world tilt and wobble. The man turned away and walked into the crowd. He disappeared among people and flashing lights. My heart hammered like a drum. I looked around and saw Dad running toward us, his face white and raw. He reached us and grabbed my shoulders. He looked at Marcus and then at me. His eyes were full of questions that had no answers yet. Someone shouted that the driver of the car was running toward the docks. The officers pushed through the crowd. The man who had been with Jenna, Tom, was shouting into his phone. The ocean hissed like it was trying to tell us something. My legs felt weak. The morning had turned into a whirlwind. The broken lamppost bent like a wounded tree. Sparks flickered and the sound of the crash still rang in my ears. I held Marcus and watched people move like pieces on a shaky chessboard. I wanted to know why the car had crashed, who had driven it, and why the man at the pier had walked away. Dad's voice was a low roar when he said, "Emma, tell me everything you know about that man." I opened my mouth, but the words were small and lost. The sirens grew louder. The winter air cut like a knife. In the space between the crash and the sirens, the story felt like it could split in a million little pieces. I looked at Marcus, his eyes bright, his hair dusted with snow, his small hands clutching my jacket. I knew the road ahead would be long and hard and full of more truths and more choices. I breathed in and felt the cold air fill my lungs. The officers moved faster now. People shouted. The pier smelled like salt and smoke and the quick fear of a town that had woken to an unexpected storm. And at that moment, everything felt like it was changing. The man who had stood with Marcus had vanished. The car had crashed. The papers were still on the table back home. The officers were shouting. Dad's hand felt warm on my shoulder, but his grip was tight like he was trying to hold a house together with his bare hands. I held Marcus close and thought of the single message I had sent the day before, a message that had started a river. The river had turned into rapids. I did not know who would be safe at the end. I only knew that the next step would change everything. The officers told us to stay close and to answer questions. People gathered like flurries around the scene. The man who had been with Jenna was nowhere to be found. Jenna had not arrived yet. The town felt too small to hold such big things. As I watched the flashing lights and the waves, I felt both afraid and fierce. I thought of kindness and of the way truth sometimes needs courage. I knew the road ahead would be full of hard days and hard truths. I wrapped my arms tighter around Marcus and whispered, "I'm here." Then, the officers asked for my phone. Dad looked at me with eyes that begged for something he could not say. I handed it over. My single message had created a chain, and the chain had led to a pier, a crash, and a man who vanished into a crowd. Someone shouted that the driver had been seen running toward the old warehouse by the docks. The officers moved like people who knew where to go. The crowd parted. My feet felt heavy as if the world had packed them with snow. I watched them go, and I thought about a long road with many hills. I thought about Jenna and Tom and the man who had walked away. I thought about Dad and his envelopes and the little acts of kindness we might still manage to do. The pier smelled of salt and oil and a strange new fear. The lamppost bent. Sparks drifted like tiny sad stars. The morning had turned into a storm I did not know how to stop. And then the officers ran toward the warehouse, and I held Marcus and watched, feeling like the story had only just begun. The warehouse was an old place by the docks. It smelled like salt and wet wood and oil. Windows were high and dusty. The officers ran toward it with flashlights and radios that buzzed. People hung back on the pier and watched like they were watching a play that had gone wrong. Dad kept Marcus close to him. He held Marcus the way he always had when a thunderstorm scared us, tight and careful. Marcus kept asking small questions. Is it dangerous, Mom? And will buttons be okay? I answered as if the world were not full of sharp edges. I said, we are safe. We are together. He believed me because he had to. The officers moved around the warehouse like they were trying to catch a shadow. Their boots made hard noises on the ground. I followed with Dad and Marcus at my side. I had to know what was happening. I had to see for myself. My phone was still in an officer's hand. They had taken it to look through messages. The single message I had sent had started all this, and now I felt like someone who had opened a door and not known what was behind it. We went up a rusted set of steps that squeaked. The air inside was colder and sounded different, like a hollow drum. Boxes were stacked and labeled in neat handwriting. Some said furniture, some said tools, and some had strange codes. A few boxes had pictures of bikes stuck to them. The sight made my stomach drop and my hands go cold. An officer found a trail of small footprints in dust that led to a back room. He crouched and followed them slowly. The footprints were small, like a child's. My breath stopped. My heart thumped so loud it felt like thunder. The back room had a single bare bulb that swung and made soft shadows. There were crates and a blue tarp on the floor. Near the tarp, I saw a small shoe, one of Marcus's shoes. My feet went weak. I reached out and touched it. The shoe was scuffed and wet like it had been run through puddles. My hand shook. Someone called out, "Over here." It was Tom. He stood near a stack of papers and pointed to a notebook on the floor. The notebook was open. The pages were full of handwriting and lists. Names and numbers and dates were written in a neat hand. At the top of one page, someone had written payments and then circled it. Dad took the notebook like it was something fragile. He read a few lines and his face went white. He muttered, "How deep is this?" The officer who had our phones took pictures and put them into a folder on his tablet. He spoke quietly into his radio. "We have receipts, notes, and a missing child's shoe. We need backup and a plan." I felt a cold tightness in my chest. The notebook had names I recognized, vendors, shops, and a list that included travel dates and the bike shop. There were also names I did not know. The notebook looked like a map that someone had used to walk in circles. As officers searched, I walked around and looked at crates. On one crate, a sticker said, "Fragile, handle with care." It seemed strange to see that word so many times. People had lives that were fragile. Hearts were fragile, too. I thought of Jenna's small face the night before, how it had gone from pale to stone. I thought of the letters in Dad's envelopes and how small kindnesses could break. Then, in the far corner, an officer found a door that led to a narrow stairwell. It smelled like damp and old shoes. The officer motioned for everyone to be quiet. His finger touched his lips and he moved up the steps slowly. I held my breath. The stair creaked under his weight. At the top, there was another room with a padlock on the door. The padlock had been forced open, like something large had been pulled hard. The officers moved in as if they had practiced this a dozen times. They called out, "Police. Come out with your hands where we can see them." Their voices shook the room like a bell. For a second there was only silence and the slow drip of water somewhere unseen. Then, behind a stack of cardboard boxes, a figure stood up and blinked. It was a man in a gray hoodie. He looked tired and scared. For a second I thought it might be the man who had been with Jenna, but when he stepped into the light, his face was different. He was young and his eyes were wild. He held a small phone and a set of keys. He looked like someone who had been caught doing something he did not fully understand. An officer stepped forward slowly. "Who are you?" he asked. The young man swallowed and said, "I work here. I load crates. I don't know anything." His voice was small and thin. The officer looked at him for a long moment like he was trying to read the truth from the spaces between his words. While the man was being checked, another officer called out from the other side of the room. He had found something under a pile of plastic, a small, blinking device, the same kind of tracker Dad had found in his truck. It had a sticker on it with the letter L faintly written in black pen. The officers exchanged looks. The device was the kind people used to follow cars and packages. Seeing it there next to the footprint and the shoe made my stomach flip. I thought of the sticky note that had said, "Meet me at the pier. Come alone. L." It was like the letter L was following us like a shadow. Officers started to gather up evidence, receipts from the bike store, printed boarding passes, and small slips with names. One slip had Jenna's name on it and a date that matched the day the Instagram photos were posted. Another had a name I had never seen before. The room filled with little noises, papers rustling, radios chirping, and the soft whine of the bulbs. Dad stood near the table and clutched the notebook. He looked at me, and I could see his hands tremble. He said, "Emma, we need to know if she did this on purpose. Did she know? Did she plan it?" His voice was low and broken. I wanted to shout that I did not know. I wanted to shout that I wished I had never sent the message. I wanted my words to be a shield. Tom, who had brought the evidence to our house, walked slowly into the back room. He carried a folded paper tightly in his hand. He walked up to the officers and said, "I have more. I found these in a locker the man used. They were hidden in a coat." He handed the papers to an officer. The officer opened them and frowned. They were lists of accounts and what looked like instructions. The instructions were short and strange. One line read, "Move funds to travel. Move funds to bike. Keep receipts messy." Another line read, "If Dad asks, say you sold old things." The handwriting was different than Jenna's notebook. It was harsher, like someone trying to make small lies sound like big truths. The officer who had the instructions looked up and said, "This looks like someone helped plan this. Someone coached them." He put his finger on a name scrawled in the corner, a name that matched the man who had shown up at our door with the envelope the day before. The officer's eyes went sharp and focused. The young man in the gray hoodie was taken to talk with an officer. He kept saying he did not know anything. His hands shook, and he kept looking at the little blinking tracker like it could be dangerous. He had mud on his shoes and a band-aid on his knuckle. He looked ordinary and lost. Time blurred. The officers worked like a team that had to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. They asked Dad to tell everything he knew. He told them about the envelopes and about the little money he had saved. He told them how he had never meant to hide anything important, only to help when he could. He told them that Jenna had always been his child and he loved her. I felt the room press in. Marcus hugged my leg and whispered, "Mom, I'm scared." I knelt and kissed his hair and said, "I'm here, baby. I won't let go." His small fingers dug into my pants like a tiny anchor. Then, as officers pulled out more papers and took photos, someone shouted that there was noise on the roof. Everyone looked up like you look up when you hear a strange sound outside your window at night. The sound was faint at first, a scraping and thump, but it grew louder. The bulb above us swayed more and threw wild shadows. One of the officers raced to the stairs and up to the roof. He called back, "We have movement on the roof. Everyone be ready." His voice was tight. The men with flashlights pointed their beams at the ceiling. Someone heard a muttered word and then a heavy step. The roof shook as if someone was running. The officers shouted for people to get down and move back. Dad stepped in front of me and Marcus like he wanted to be a wall. He grabbed Marcus close. A loud crash came from above like someone had dropped a heavy box from the sky. Dust rained down through a crack in the ceiling and landed on the tables. The light flickered and then went out, leaving us in a dim, nervous dark. Radios hissed. Someone shouted, "Get down." We all ducked and held our breath. My ears thudded with the sound of my heart. In the dark, I could hear footsteps running across the roof and then someone sliding down the ropes attached to the side of the building. A low voice called, "Police. Don't shoot." The words were muffled by the thickness of the walls. The officers aimed their lights and moved as if in a dance they had practiced many times. One officer fired a warning shot into the air. The crack of the gun made my blood run cold like ice. Marcus began to cry, and I wrapped my arms around him so tight I feared I might squeeze the air out of us both. Dad's face was white, and he whispered, "Stay down." Then, a shadow fell through the broken skylight and hit the floor in front of us with a heavy thump. For a second, no one moved. The shadow was big and for a moment I thought it was a person. Then, as it landed and rolled, it became clear it was a large wooden crate that had been pushed from the roof. The crate broke open and spilled small, bright boxes across the floor. The boxes were labeled with a logo from a company I recognized from the receipts. Someone screamed. The officers shouted. The room smelled like wet wood and dust and something sharp, like hot metal. The man who had been on the roof shouted again, "Where is it? Where did she go?" His voice was angry and quick like a trapped animal. My heart hammered. The scene felt like a play that had tipped into real danger. The broken crate had made a path of chaos. The officers grabbed the boxes and pulled them away. Inside, there were more receipts and a small, locked metal case. The case had a sticker with the letter L on it. The sticker was half torn like it had been stuck and then pulled in a hurry. An officer pried the case open with a tool. Inside, there were pages of names and a small USB drive. The drive glowed like a tiny black stone. The officer looked at it and said, "This might have everything we need." He held it up like a prize. At that same moment, someone at the doorway shouted, "She's here. Jenna's at the back door." The words made our chests jump. The room suddenly filled with hope and fear like a tight burst of light. We all turned to the back door. It opened slowly. A woman stood there. She was covered in dust and her hair hung in wet strands. She looked like someone who had been running for a long time. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then, before anyone could step forward, a loud, sharp sound split the air. It was a metallic pop, then another, like balloons bursting one by one. Sparks flew from the far corner of the room where someone had knocked over a line of old metal barrels. The barrels tipped and a bright, hot flare burst out. It was not fire, but a shower of sparks that jumped high and sent everyone ducking and covering their faces. The sparks fell across the table and skittered over the papers, making everything glow like tiny stars for a second. The light painted our faces in strobe flashes. The officer shouted, "Get out. Get out now." People scrambled toward the stairs and the exit. Marcus clung to me and screamed. The noise was like a drumbeat in my chest. I tried to move, but my foot caught on a loose plank. I stumbled and fell. The last thing I saw before I closed my eyes was Jenna's face, half hidden by dust and sweat, and her lips moving like she was trying to say something important. Then the room erupted into chaos. Sirens wailed outside like wolves. People ran. The lamp that had hung over our heads crashed and sent a shower of sparks into the dark. The warehouse filled with smoke and the smell of hot metal. I felt hands pulling me up. Dad's voice was above the noise, shouting, "Emma. Marcus. Move." He grabbed us and pushed us toward the exit with a strength I had not known he had. We stumbled out onto the cold air, and the night sky seemed too wide and too bright. The pier had been emptied and the town had gathered at the edge like birds on a wire. We stood shivering and coughing while officers ran back and forth. Someone wrapped a blanket around Marcus. He clung to me and begged, "Mom, I'm scared." I hugged him so tight I could feel his heart racing like a frightened bird. In the distance, the broken lamp on the pier threw one last bright flash. The warehouse door slammed shut behind a wall of smoke. Officers yelled into radios. The sky above the water looked empty and endless. I looked at Jenna across the cold space. She was being led away by two officers, her face to the ground. She did not look at Dad. She did not look at me. Her shoulders were hunched like she was trying to protect something inside her chest. Dad's hand was on my shoulder, but he did not say anything. He only stared at the dark building as if trying to read its insides. My mind buzzed with too many questions. The letter L had been there. The tracker had been found. The notebook had names. Jenna had come back and then chaos had erupted. Marcus whimpered in my arms. The fire trucks arrived and water sprayed into the air. The pier smelled like wet smoke and cold night. People whispered. Someone said they had seen a shadow running away from the pier. Someone else said they had seen a figure jump into a small boat. I wanted to run after the shadow. I wanted to chase the person who had started this and pull them down. I wanted to know why Jenna had been there and who had pushed the crate. I wanted to know why my single message had made the world tilt. But in that loud, smoky night, all I could do was hold Marcus and count his breaths. Each breath was small and true. Each breath kept us alive and real. Then, as the water hissed on the building and the officers shouted, a single phrase came to me like a bell: "We are not finished." The town would remember this night for a long time. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was not complete. We stood under the streetlight and the snow began to fall again, soft and white. I pressed my face into Marcus's hair and whispered, "We will get through this." My voice felt small, but it had to be enough. Behind us, in the smoky glow, someone moved fast and disappeared into the dark. The night swallowed the shadow, and I knew the next part of the story would begin the moment the sparks cooled. Snow drifted across the pier like tiny white feathers. It landed on my hair, on Marcus's blanket, on Dad's jacket, on the cracked boards beneath our feet. Everything felt still for a moment, like the whole world was catching its breath. But stillness never lasts long in stories like this. Officers moved around us, their boots thudding against wetwood. One was on the radio calling for a second unit. Another was taping off the warehouse area with bright yellow tape that snapped in the wind. The fire truck hoses hissed, spraying water that steamed as it hit the hot metal sparks inside the building. It almost looked peaceful from far away, like rain falling on a sleeping giant, but I could feel, deep in my stomach, that something worse was coming. Dad squeezed my shoulder. He said nothing, but the silence between us was heavy. He kept glancing in the direction where the shadowy figure had run, the one we had all seen slip into the night as the chaos unfolded. Marcus sniffed and wiped his nose on the blanket. "Mom," he whispered, "why did that man take me to the pier?" His eyes were big and innocent, and the question stabbed me like ice. "I'm going to find out," I said. My voice shook. I hated that it shook. Dad knelt in front of Marcus and brushed snow from his hair. "You're safe now," he told him softly. "Nothing is going to hurt you." I wished I believed that as much as Marcus did. He nodded like a little soldier being told to stay brave. The officers asked to speak to me, and one gently guided us toward a bench by the pier where the snow wasn't too thick yet. Marcus sat beside me, holding my hand like it was the only thing keeping him on the ground. The officer flipped open a small notebook. "Emma, we need to understand exactly what happened when you reached the pier. You said the man knew your name." "Yes," I said. "He said he had been waiting for me to find him. That there was more to tell. And he had Marcus with him?" "He wasn't hurting him," I said quickly. Marcus was calm. He had cookies. My voice tightened. He didn't seem scared. The officer scribbled something. "Did he say his name?" "No." "Did he mention Jenna?" I hesitated. He didn't say her name. But he said things moved fast after I sent my message. I swallowed. Like he knew about the message I sent Dad. The officer's eyes sharpened. "So he's been watching your communications." Dad's jaw tightened. "He's been watching all of us." My throat burned. "But why? Why us? Why our family?" Before the officer could answer, the warehouse behind us let out a loud metallic groan, like the building itself was trying to speak. Everyone turned. Smoke puffed out of a broken window. Another officer shouted, "Watch the south wall. It's unstable." Dad pulled me and Marcus back just as a small section of the outer siding caved inward and crashed onto the snow. People gasped. Marcus clutched my hand harder. The officer radioed for reinforcement. "We need a structural team here ASAP." Everything felt like it was spinning, but I forced myself to focus. "What about Jenna?" I asked. The officer looked toward where she had been taken. "She's being questioned. She's not under arrest at this time. But she was found entering a restricted area during an active search, so we need answers." "She came to warn us," I whispered. I didn't know why I believed that. Maybe it was the way she had looked at me in the smoke. Dad shook his head slowly. "Or she came because she knew something was about to happen." Snowflakes landed on his eyelashes. He looked tired and old in a way I had never seen. Then another officer called out, "We found a trail." Everyone's head snapped toward the docks. "Footprints," the officer yelled. "Fresh ones leading toward the fishing boats." Dad's hand tightened on my arm. "Emma, stay behind me." We followed the officers to the docks where rows of boats rocked gently in the dark water. Snow clung to their ropes. The footprints were clear, one set of large prints, deep because the person had been running fast. "If this is the same man you saw," the officer said, "he may have used a boat to get away." A chill ran through me. Why would he take Marcus to the pier? Why leave him there if he planned to escape? Dad stared at the footprints. Because he wanted Emma to see him. His voice was haunted. He wanted her to know he was part of this. Marcus tugged my sleeve. Mom, what if he left something behind? The question made my breath stop in my chest. Because children see things adults miss. We ran back to the exact spot where Marcus had stood with the man. The officers helped search, checking every corner, every bench, every shadowed crack in the pier. Snow fell harder now, making everything blur. Then Marcus pointed. There, under the bench. A small folded paper lay half buried in the snow. My heart hammered as an officer lifted it carefully with gloves. He handed it to me. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was the same handwriting as the sticky note. It said, "You're looking in the wrong place. She didn't lie to hurt you. She lied because someone made her." My stomach twisted. Dad leaned over my shoulder. His breath froze in the air. "Someone made her?" he whispered. "Who?" I didn't get the chance to answer, because at that exact moment, a loud voice boomed from the police radio. "Everyone, we've got a situation at the station. The man from the warehouse, the one in the hoodie, he's missing. He escaped custody." My blood went cold. Dad's face drained of color. "What do you mean he escaped?" "They had him." The radio crackled again. "And we have a report of someone breaking into your father's house." My vision blurred. Dad gasped and took a step back. "My house?" The officer grabbed his radio. "Do we have any confirmation on?" The radio voice cut him off. "The intruder left something. It's a box. Black. Labeled with the letter L." My heart slammed so hard I couldn't breathe. Dad staggered like he'd been punched. His voice broke. "Emma, he's sending us messages." His eyes filled with something sharp and fearful. "This isn't random. This isn't about money. Someone is doing this to our family on purpose." Snow blew harder, like the sky itself was warning us. Marcus whimpered and buried his face in my coat. And before anyone could speak again, another officer came skidding across the pier, slipping on the snow, shouting, "You need to come see what's inside that box. Now." His voice cracked with panic. The message inside, it mentions Emma. And Marcus. And Jenna. Air rushed out of my lungs. Dad grabbed my hand. The officer looked at me with wide, urgent eyes. "It says," he whispered, "that this is only the first warning." Lightning flashed across the winter sky, no thunder, just light, and the snow glowed blue for an instant, making everyone's faces look ghostly. My heart pounded as we rushed toward Dad's house, the officers surrounding us. The night wasn't quiet anymore. The story wasn't confused anymore. Someone, a person calling themselves L, was pulling strings. And the next message, the one inside the black box, was waiting to tear open everything we thought we knew. But when we reached Dad's house and the officer opened the black box with shaking hands, what we found inside was something that made the room go silent. A photo. A single photograph. Of me. Standing at my kitchen window. Taken from outside. Not last week. Not last month. Last night. And under the photo, written in the same handwriting, "You should have never sent that message." My knees buckled. Dad caught me. Marcus screamed. The officers froze. And then, before anyone could move, a shadow moved past the back window. Fast. Deliberate. Watching us. And the chapter ends here, exactly at this extreme moment, before we reveal who the shadow is or what they want. The shadow at the back window slid across the glass like a dark whisper. It moved too smoothly, too quietly, like it already knew the layout of Dad's house. Every breath in the room froze. Even the snow outside seemed to stop falling. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the officer closest to the window shouted, "Move back," and rushed forward with his flashlight raised. Dad pulled me and Marcus behind him, shielding us like a wall. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud and painful. Marcus clung to my jacket and buried his face in my stomach. The beam of the officer's flashlight cut across the backyard, but the shadow was gone. Vanished. The backyard was nothing but snow, fence, and a trail of footprints leading toward the tree line behind Dad's property. Fresh footprints. Deep ones. Whoever had been there was running. And fast. The officers reacted immediately. 2 ran out the back door with flashlights. Another shouted coordinates into his radio. The house burst into commotion, boots pounding, radios crackling, urgent voices filling every hallway. Dad locked the door and pressed his forehead against the cold glass for a second, shaking. "This is my fault," he whispered. "I should have been more careful. I should have." "It is not your fault," I said quickly, grabbing his arm. "Whoever Elle is, he's been planning this for a long time. He's been watching us." Dad closed his eyes. "But why? What does he want from you? From Marcus? From Jenna?" I didn't know. And the not knowing felt like a rope tightening around my chest. Another officer approached with gloves on, holding the photo that had been inside the black box, the picture taken of me through my kitchen window. He spoke in a low, steady voice. "This was taken from a close distance," he said. "Someone was standing right outside your home last night. Watching. Tracking your movements." I swallowed hard. The thought made my skin crawl. My house, my safe place, had not been safe at all. Marcus looked up at me with scared eyes. "Mom, was that man outside my window too?" I froze. I didn't have an answer. But I knew the truth in my bones. If he had been near my house, if he had taken that picture, if he had taken Marcus to the pier, then yes, he had been close. Too close. Dad took Marcus gently. "It's okay, champ," he murmured. "You're safe with us." But even he didn't sound like he believed it fully. The officers began searching the house. One went upstairs. Another checked the basement. Dad stayed by the door with Marcus, holding him close. I sat at the table with the photo in front of me, the picture of me standing in my kitchen, doing nothing special, completely unaware of the eyes staring at me from the dark. Beneath the photo lay the handwritten note. "You should have never sent that message." The message. The one to my dad. The one that started all of this. Was Elle angry because I exposed something? Because I alerted Dad? Because the truth had come too close? I turned the paper over, hoping for more clues, but it was blank. Then an officer came down from the stairs and said, "We found something in the attic." Dad frowned. "The attic? No one's been up there in years." The officer motioned for us to follow. Dad lifted Marcus up, and we walked carefully toward the staircase that led to the dusty attic door. The wood creaked under our feet. When the officer pushed the attic door open, cold air rushed down the stairs, carrying the smell of old insulation and forgotten things. We climbed the narrow steps. At the top, an officer shined his flashlight across stacks of dusty boxes and old holiday decorations. Everything looked untouched except for one thing. A small chair, placed facing the attic window, directly pointed toward the backyard. On the chair was a folded blanket, not Dad's, and crumbs of cookies, the same kind Marcus had been given at the pier. My blood ran cold. Someone had been hiding in this attic, watching us, waiting. Dad stepped back as if he had been pushed. "How long?" he whispered. "How long has he been coming here?" The officer stepped around carefully, checking the floor. "Days. Maybe weeks." He pointed at a small indentation in the dust, footprints. "Big ones." Marcus whimpered. "Mom, was he here when I slept over at Grandpa's house?" My stomach twisted. I didn't want him to be afraid, but I could not lie. "I don't know," I whispered. "But you're safe now." The officer lifted something off the floor. "We found this." It was a phone charger. New. Not Dad's. Not anyone's we knew. Someone had been plugging in their phone. Here. In the attic. Right above us. Dad staggered backward and sat on an old trunk, his hands in his hair. How did I not hear anything? How did I not know someone was in my home? "People who do this," the officer said gently, "are careful. Skilled." He knew how to move without being heard. Marcus hid his face in my jacket again. Then the officer by the attic window called out, "We've got more footprints outside, leading toward the woods." The man had been here. Minutes ago. While we were downstairs. I felt lightheaded. "Let's get everyone out of the attic," the officer said. "It's not secure." We climbed down the steps quickly. My legs shook with every movement. When we reached the living room, the lead officer stood waiting. "We're placing your father's house under temporary lockdown," he said. "No one in or out without authorization. We need to keep you safe while we investigate who Elle is and why he's targeting your family." Dad nodded shakily. I held Marcus closer. He was cold from fear more than from the weather. Then Jenna arrived. Snow clung to her hair and eyelashes. Her face was pale. Her hands shook so much she had to grab the doorframe to stay steady. The second she saw me, she burst into tears. "Emma," she cried, stumbling forward. "I didn't know. I didn't know it would go this far. I swear I didn't." "Jenna," Dad said sharply, "what aren't you telling us?" She looked at him with eyes full of guilt and fear. "I didn't mean to lie," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to take anything. I was scared. I didn't know who else to turn to. And he told me that if I said anything, he'd ruin everything." Dad stiffened. "He? Who is he?" Jenna wiped her face, trembling. Then she whispered a name so soft we almost couldn't hear it. "It's Liam." The officers wrote it down quickly. Dad's jaw dropped. "Liam? As in our cousin Liam?" Jenna nodded, crying harder now. "I didn't know how deep he was in. I didn't know he was using me. He said he'd help me with money, that he knew ways to get extra cash fast. He made me promise to lie to everyone. He said he'd take care of everything as long as I kept quiet." Dad's face turned pale. L for Liam. My mind spun. The notes. The trackers. The messages. The shadow. The photograph. It was him. "Where is he now?" the officer asked. "He said," Jenna choked, "he said if anything went wrong, he'd come for the ones who started it." The room went silent. The ones who started it. My heart stopped. "That means," I whispered. The officer stepped forward urgently. "Emma, did you send the first message that revealed what Jenna was hiding?" My throat tightened. "Yes." The officer's face tensed. Then Jenna burst out. "He told me he saw the message. He said he'd make sure Emma understood what happens when people interfere." Dad grabbed the table to steady himself. "Oh God," he whispered, "he's after Emma." The officers moved instantly. "Everyone stay together," one shouted. "We need to get Emma and Marcus to a secure location now." They started ushering us toward the door. But just as they reached the entryway, a loud crash shook the house. A loud, hard, body-slamming crash. Against the front door. Like someone throwing their full weight into it. Dad jumped. Marcus screamed. I felt my heart flip in my chest. The officer shouted, "Get away from the door." But before we could even turn, a second crash hit the door. The hinges bent. Snow blew in through the cracks. And then a voice, a low, familiar, furious voice, growled from outside. "Emma, open the door." The officers drew their weapons. The house shook. The door bent inward. Then a boot kicked through the wood. Splinters exploded across the floor. And standing in the shattered doorway, silhouetted by snow, breathing hard, was Liam, covered in cuts, covered in dust, eyes wild, jaw tight, and locked right on me. He took one step forward and snarled, "You ruined everything." And the chapter ends here, exactly on this extreme moment, before anything else is revealed or explained. Snow blew into the living room through the shattered doorway. The cold wrapped around us like a painful hand. Liam stood there, tall, wild-eyed, his chest heaving, his breath fogging in the air. The whole house seemed to shrink around him. Officers shouted commands. Dad pulled Marcus behind him. Jenna covered her mouth in horror. But Liam didn't look at any of them. He looked only at me. "You ruined everything, Emma," he growled, stepping through the broken door frame, shards of wood crunching under his boots. "One stupid message, and you destroyed months of planning." My knees threatened to give way, but I didn't move. If I moved, if I flinched, if I stepped back, Liam would win. And after everything he had done, after all the fear he had sown into my family, I couldn't give him even that. Two officers drew their weapons. "Liam Bennett," one shouted. "Stay where you are." But Liam didn't stop. His eyes flashed with something dangerous, anger mixed with obsession, like he believed he owned the ending of our story. "Emma was supposed to stay quiet," he hissed. "She was supposed to mind her business. She wasn't supposed to make this a problem." I swallowed hard. "I didn't know anything, Liam. I didn't even know you were involved until tonight." "That's the point," he snapped. "You weren't supposed to know. You weren't supposed to ask questions. You weren't supposed to." A bright flashlight hit his eyes. He flinched. The lead officer barked, "Hands where we can see them." Liam lifted his hands slowly, not surrendering, but mocking. Look at all of you. Acting like heroes. He let out a laugh that made my stomach turn. You have no idea what she started. Dad stepped forward, voice trembling. What do you want from my daughter? Liam tilted his head. Oh, Uncle Dave. I tried to help Jenna. I tried to help the kids. I even helped Emma without her knowing. He pointed toward me. Do you remember that loan you got 3 months ago? For the winter repairs. My heart stopped. He smirked. Yeah, that wasn't from the bank. That was from me. I just used someone else's name. Dad froze in place, like someone had turned him to stone. You've all been in my hands for months, Liam said, his voice rising. I tracked you. I watched you. I made sure everything lined up exactly the way it needed to. The officers inched closer. But Liam's voice got louder, feeding off the attention. I gave Jenna money to make her trust me. I paid her bills. I bought the bikes and told her to post them. I told her to lie about money being tight. I told her to use Dad's envelopes. Everything she did because I told her to. Jenna broke into sobs. Liam, stop. And oh, he shouted. She followed my rules perfectly. Until Emma had to send that message. He glared at me again. That message made your dad suspicious. That message made the officers look at the wrong person. That message messed up everything. My voice barely came out. Why me? Why target me? Because you were the obedient one, he spat. The quiet one. The invisible one. You never caused problems. You never questioned anything. You were the easiest one to break. Dad stepped forward. You stay away from my daughter. Liam's expression twisted into something dark and ugly. I was doing all of you a favor, he shouted. You think Jenna could have bought her kids anything without me? You think you could take care of Marcus alone? You think Dad could have kept that old house running? I did more for this family than any of you ever did. The officers closed in. Liam's breath quickened. His eyes darted around like he was searching for an exit that didn't exist. Liam, I said quietly, surprising myself. You hurt us. All of us. You scared Marcus. You made Jenna lie. You made Dad feel like he failed. My voice cracked. Why? Why did you do this? He looked at me, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Shame. He swallowed hard. Because I wanted to be the one you all needed. I wanted to be the one who saved the family. I wanted everyone to depend on me. I wanted to be the hero. Tears formed in Jenna's eyes. Dad closed his eyes, pained. The officers inched even closer. But Liam snapped back into anger. But you ruined everything, he screamed. You weren't supposed to fight back. You were supposed to stay small. Dad finally shouted, put your hands down and surrender, Liam. Nothing you say will make this right. But Liam took another step toward me. The officers lunged. Don't move, one yelled. Liam froze, then reached into his coat pocket. Dad pulled Marcus into his arms. The officers shouted, drop whatever is in your hand. Liam's face shook with fury. It's too late. You can't fix what she broke. I held my breath. What's in your pocket, Liam? I whispered. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then slowly, with trembling fingers, he pulled out a phone. A cracked phone. He held it up. This, he said, is everything. All the accounts. All the messages. All the proof. Every screenshot. Every lie. Every transfer. Every tool I used. All the leverage I had. The officers stiffened. Dad whispered, Liam, don't do anything stupid. Liam lifted the phone higher. Then his thumb hovered over the screen. If I press one button, he said, everything gets erased. Gone. Every trace of what I did. Every message that could explain anything. The whole story gone. The officers raised their weapons. Put the phone down now. Marcus cried into Dad's shoulder. Jenna pressed her hands to her mouth. My pulse slammed against my skull. Liam, I whispered, don't do this. But his eyes were full of a sadness so twisted it looked like hate wearing a mask. You shouldn't have sent that message, he murmured. You should have stayed in your place. But you didn't, and now everyone will suffer for it. He tightened his grip on the phone. He opened his mouth to speak again. But he didn't get the chance. Because in the middle of all the shouting, the fear, the standoff, the rising tension, Marcus moved. My little boy. The child who still believed in kindness. He slipped out of Dad's arms before anyone could stop him. And he ran. Straight toward Liam. Everyone screamed at once. Marcus shouted, "Stop!" Liam's eyes widened. And in that split second, the smallest second in the world, Liam hesitated. He lowered his arm just an inch. That 1 inch changed everything. The lead officer lunged, grabbing Liam's arm and twisting it behind him. Another officer grabbed his shoulders. The phone flew out of Liam's hand and skidded under the couch. Liam fought like a trapped animal, screaming, "No! No! No! Let go of me!" Dad grabbed Marcus and pulled him back. "Don't touch my son!" Dad roared, shaking with fury and fear. The officers wrestled Liam to the ground. He kicked. He thrashed. He screamed. But he was outnumbered. Within seconds, he was handcuffed. Breathing hard. Face red. Hair wild. Eyes burning. And defeated. Completely, absolutely defeated. The officers lifted him to his feet. "You're under arrest," the lead officer said firmly. "For stalking, identity fraud, financial manipulation, endangerment of a minor, breaking and entering, and multiple other charges." Liam glared at me a last, desperate glare, then spat out. "This isn't over, Emma." I stared at him, feeling something in me shift, something strong where the fear had been. "Yes," I whispered, "it is." And with that, the officers dragged him outside, into the swirling snow. As soon as he was gone, the room fell quiet. Dad sank onto the couch, shaking. Jenna collapsed into the chair and sobbed. Marcus clung to my neck, whispering, "Mom, I was brave." "You were," I said, kissing his forehead. "But don't ever run like that again." He nodded and hugged me tighter. The officers returned the cracked phone intact. "This has everything we need," one said. "Every message, every transfer, every account he used. He's going away for a long time." Dad finally let out a breath, a long, heavy breath, like a weight had dropped off his shoulders. "Emma," he said softly, "you saved this family." I shook my head. "No, Dad. We saved each other." Jenna walked toward me slowly, crying. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For lying. For letting him control me. For letting you take the fall. I didn't know how to get out." I hugged her. "You're out now." Her tears soaked into my shoulder. The officers gathered the evidence. The house warmed again. The snow softened outside. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The storm was over. It didn't leave us untouched, storms never do, but it left us standing. Dad wrapped his arms around me and Marcus and Jenna, pulling us into a shaky, tired, grateful hug. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. "We're finally going to be okay." And for once, I believed him.